Americans who would agree with that, but when it gets translated into politics, it gets all confused. And trying to bridge that gap between, I think, the good impulses of the overwhelming majority of Americans and how our politics expresses itself continues to be the biggest challenge.
God, don't you fucking miss that guy? I mean, I assume there are people that heard the interview at the time that said that doesn't go far enough. But think about how different things would be today if we proceeded along those lines for the past 5 years instead of going backwards. Think about that. And the reason I played it is because it ties directly into the political philosophy of someone like Stacey Abrams, who believes change is possible, but also knows the work that needs to go into getting there. There's no quick fix, man. So, again, her new book is called Our Time Is Now, Power, Purpose, and the Fight for a Fair America. You can get it now where you get books. And this is me and Stacey Abrams coming right up. We're sponsored today by Space Force from co-creators Steve Carell and Greg Daniels. Space Force is a new kind of workplace comedy where the stakes are sky high and the ambitions even higher. Steve Carell plays Marc, a decorated pilot with dreams of running the Air Force, but he's thrown for a loop when he finds himself tapped by the White House to lead a new branch of the U.S. Armed Forces, Space Force. Skeptical but dedicated, Marc uproots his family and moves to a remote base in Colorado, where he and a colorful team of scientists and spacemen are tasked by the White House with getting American boots on the moon again. And they need to hurry in order to achieve total space dominance. It's got a great ensemble cast with people like Lisa Kudrow, Ben Schwartz, Jimmy O. Yang. I've talked to all of them on this show, plus Diana Silvers, Tawny Newsome, and John Malkovich. Space Force starring Steve Carell is now streaming on Netflix. And if you want to know more from behind the scenes, join host and Space Force star Jimmy O. Yang in discussion with various cast and crew members from the series. Find Inside Joke Space Force on all podcast platforms. All right. We're also sponsored by Simply Safe. What's the number one sign of a bad home security system? A home security system that's so complicated you never use it. That's exactly the type of security system Simply Safe has spent a decade fighting against. They believe that simpler is safer, and it's exactly why Simply Safe is the home security for right now, when feeling safe at home has never been more important. Simply Safe was designed to be easy to use while protecting your whole home. Order online with a click of a button, open the box, place the sensors, plug it in, and your home is protected around the clock. No technician or salesperson has to come into your house, and you don't need to pay any outrageous monthly fees or sign a 2-year contract. Simply Safe's 24/7 professional monitoring and emergency dispatch starts at 50 cents a day. That's a deal considering Simply Safe was named Best Overall Home Security of 2020 by U.S. News and World Report. See for yourself. Head to simplysafe.com/WTF and get a free HD camera. That's simplysafe.com/WTF to make sure they know that our show sent you. Okay. Got it? Good. How's it going?
Well, we have a little bit of a problem here in Georgia with the whole, voting being right. But other than that, things are okay.
Yeah, I read about that this morning. I mean, what exactly is happening? Is it all intentional?
It is incompetence plus malfeasance.
Uh-huh.
So they know what to do, but they don't want to do it because doing it means the wrong people in their estimation get to vote. And then the things they do know how to do, they do it so poorly and slipshod that today we've had hours-long lines across the state.
And they've got new machines that no one knows how to operate.
Correct.
So on some level, the trick was, we got these great new machines. Good luck.
We got these great new machines. We don't have enough technicians. We aren't going to give you the resources to make them work. And yes, go with God. Yeah.
And so what is your, like, you have people on the ground from Fair Fight at all the polling places?
Not at all of them, because we have 159 counties.
Okay.
And so you've got to assume, in Atlanta, 25 to 30 polling places. Other counties have fewer or more. So we are trying to stock up wherever we can, but we've got a statewide voter protection hotline. So anyone who's seeing problems can call us. And so we've been running interference all day. I mean, I got my first text at 7:18 from a former executive at IBM because she was at a polling place where the machine didn't work. And so they all had to get paper ballots.
Oh, my God. And were you anticipating something?
Yes, we knew this was going to be terrible. And that's one of the reasons we've been pushing so hard on absentee balloting and vote by mail, but they even managed to both do a good thing by telling people they could do it and then completely under-resourcing the process. I, in fact, had an absentee ballot that I could not submit because my envelope was sealed shut. And when I requested another envelope, it never showed up. So I had to go and stand in line this morning to go and vote.
They have people micromanaging these suppression efforts to the point at the level of envelopes.
I would say, and that goes to the incompetence. So they use a third-party vendor out of Arizona. So if you have a problem, you can't just pick up the phone and call and say, I need something more. You've got to call someone who calls Arizona to see if they can do what they need to do. But they were already behind because no one expected the volume of requests. And so that's why it's so infuriating, because these are people with poor intention, but they also have incredibly poor management.
I don't know how, because I was thinking about it from my own life and in terms of how you approach activism or how to make democracy work on this level. I don't know how you maintain hope in the face of what you went through with Brian Kemp and the governor election. And your choice to not concede, which was beautiful. But I mean, when you know for years that this is happening since the beginning of the Republic, I mean, and you still sort of kind of push along and believe that it's possible that we can turn things around. I mean, like with a day like today, I mean, how do you keep the faith?
Number one, because my great grandparents were slaves, and I got to be the first Black woman to stand for governor in the history of the United States. So that's one.
Yeah.
And so that means progress exists. Number two, I'm a woman of faith who believes the scripture that says faith without works is dead. So I don't get to have faith if I'm not willing to do the effort part of it.
Yeah.
But it's also because I know what can happen when it works, because we've seen it. It's not as though there's this, mythological reality out there that I have no concept of. I've actually seen it work in other places. There's states like Oregon, which no one would normally consider nirvana, but if you want to vote, it works there. And it works in neighborhoods in Georgia. It just doesn't work for the people who need it to work the most. And the problem is, my job isn't to move to Oregon. It's to bring nirvana here. Yeah.
Because I find that even as somebody who is a progressive person, that when it comes down to state elections and stuff, I generally will defer to somebody I know who knows more than me and say, who do I vote for? I mean, I always vote, but I don't always know, what people do or how it affects my life. But that's not bad, right?
No, it's not. In fact, that's how most people make their choices. We decide based on our own knowledge, but then we seek out other people's advice. It's why, every talk show host in America has a show.
Yeah.
Because we seek information from others who we think might know something more or get us access to something more.
Uh-huh.
The issue is making sure that the information is good and making sure people believe they have the right to ask the questions. One of the things we found when I started the New Georgia Project, which was our voter registration effort that I launched in 2014, we found that people didn't vote, especially the lowest propensity voters, those who were the most afraid of voting, because they were afraid of making a mistake, because they didn't have anyone they could call. They didn't have a progressive friend who knew more about the judges on the ballot.
Right.
They didn't have someone or know how to get the information they needed. And so they were so afraid of making mistakes, they just didn't participate. Because if you didn't participate, you didn't screw up.
Or they may have been overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's a matter of educating those people.
Exactly. And it's about, so if we're going to think of another state that's doing great work, Washington State sends out a compendium of all the things that are on the ballot, gives you information about every single person and every single issue, and it sends you your ballot. So you can sit at home, read through it, understand it, and then make your choices. In Georgia, you're lucky if you have access to that kind of information because it's all communally based. And then you get to the polling place, assuming you can get inside or assuming your absentee ballot shows up, neither of which is guaranteed. Then you have to try to guess your way through. And if you stood in line for 8 hours or 7 hours or 4 hours, your willingness to ponder diminishes dramatically.
The sad thing is, and it's horrendous, and I don't know that I think about it enough, is how much of this is totally intentional. That disenfranchisement is totally intentional, and that, like, alongside of with the police brutality protests and institutional racism in general, that this is all part of it. That this, the voter disenfranchisement, police brutality, jail slavery is all part of the same momentum that was, put on the books at the beginning of the country.
The system works exactly the way it was designed to work. The system at its inception granted the right to vote to white men who owned land. It denied the right to vote to women. It denied the humanity of blacks. It denied the existence of Native Americans. And we had successive laws that essentially said, if you are Latino or Asian American, we don't want you either. We want your land, we want your labor, but we don't want you. And then the 13th Amendment ended slavery, except if you were incarcerated. And then the Reconstruction laws and the subsequent laws said that you could be arrested for anything. If you were black, you could be arrested for standing on a street corner waiting for your wife. And the minute you were arrested, you were once again subject to jail slavery. The system does the things it was designed. And the challenge is the people who are now part of the system are demanding something new. And I think that's been the challenge for the last 240 years. For 240 years, the people who designed the system and who benefited from the existence of the system have been unwilling to make more than just modest changes to it.
Yeah.
And the inflection point we're in right now, the reason we're seeing police brutality take center stage as a conversation, the reason we're having a conversation about criminal justice reform, the reason we're talking about these systemic inequities is that they have always been baked into the system as a way to support the superstructure. But now the victims are demanding their rights because there are enough of us to demand action and to reconstruct the system. But the other pieces that we have to remember is the system is people. We elect people to make these decisions. We disembody their responsibility by calling it a system.
Yeah.
But everything that happens because someone decided it should, or someone decided they didn't need to do anything about what was broken. And so if we want something new, we have to do it. And voting is the way to do that, which is why voter suppression has been baked into this all along, because the very people who are the victims of voter suppression are the people who would have the incentive to change the structure itself.
And if it was righteous and if the country worked properly, it would all work like Washington State. It would be that easy.
For voting, absolutely.
Yeah. And that seems like a fundamental right that everyone should have, and we should all be informed, and it should not be a challenge.
Exactly. I mean, and it's thinking about part of the reason I wrote the book was that we think about these things in isolation. We think about them in silos. We think that it's just happenstance that if you live in the South, you have these high rates of incarceration and you have people who are permanently disenfranchised if they're incarcerated. No, it was part of the idea. Arrest them, incarcerate them, and when they get out, they still can't rejoin the community. And so you permanently disempower them. We have to start understanding what the pieces are, but we also have to understand how the pieces work together. That this is, to the extent it is a system, it's an intricate system where pieces fit together. And when you can make them all work really well, really rich people get wealthier, really powerful people stay powerful, and those who get ground up by the system continue to feed in and get ground up by the system.
I think it's like there are people who are